Okay, we are live. Absolute pleasure today to welcome a true industry icon, pioneer of performance-based hiring, a man who needs little introduction, but you're going to get one anyway. I'd love to get a bit of an introduction from yourself, Lou, a bit of background for those of people who haven't come across you in our
Yeah,
space.
well, somebody told me about 10 years ago that I was the grandfather, or maybe the father of recruiting. That was 20 years ago. Ten years ago, it was the godfather. Now or the grandfather. Now it's the great grandfather. So I've been around a long time recruiting. And when I started getting referrals from grandkids, I said, okay, it's time to get out of the business. But nonetheless, I've been around for a long time in the recruiting business, but uh, kind of take a different kind of take on recruiting. But so I've seen a lot of problems, a lot of challenges, and somehow from 40 years of history, I see a lot of things being repeated over and over and over again. So we'll talk about some of those.
Yeah, awesome. And I think, that's going to be one of the big themes of today. It's about leveraging human knowledge, human experience, combining that with artificial intelligence to allow us to do things that simply weren't possible at this scale before. And kind of one of the big areas right now, when we think about the industry, one of the big challenges is this mismatch between job descriptions and applicants, job descriptions and performance, and ultimately this kind of overbearing issue of far too many applications that are somewhat limiting talent acquisition professionals from being able to reach that true bar raising talent within organizations. So I think what would be really useful before we start is maybe just a bit of background in performance-based hiring, people that aren't familiar with that kind of methodology, how it works, what it was born out of. We'd love to get some kind of background from yourself.
Well, let me kind of go back. And I think my first search assignment, which was kind of strange, was 1978, January 1978. So most of you on this call weren't born, and your parents probably weren't born. And I had been in industry 10 years prior to that, running a manufacturing company with a couple hundred people. I just didn't like my boss, quit, said, I don't like the corporate politics. So I became a recruiter. But my first assignment was for plant manager in the automotive industry. And the president, whom I knew, gave me a handwritten job description, skills, experience, competency, results oriented, how to do this, how to do that, how to degree. And I looked at him. This was in 1978, not an HR background. I have an engineering and manufacturing background and financial and cost background. I said, Mike, that's not a job description. That is a person description. Let's put the person description in the parking lot. What do you want the person to do? And it was just seemed natural not to talk about the person, to talk about the job. And yet I think most companies get that backwards. No, the job. What's the job? Tell me about it. So in this case, Mike said, and I still know the guy, he's pretty old over me, but he's still around. He said, I want someone to turn around the manufacturing plant. And it was an old line automotive manufacturing plant. I mean, it was a bad plant making automotive parts for General Motors, and it was in Southern California. It's where the Beach Boys and the accessories were done. So that's what it was. We walked through the plant, found 5 or 6 or 7 things that were just terrible. It was dirty. It was laid out poorly. People were not assigned to the right work. The machines weren't all working. It was just a bad plant. So we found 7 or 8 things that would, in priority order, that if you turn those around, company would go from a loss to profit. That became the performance-based job description. In more than 2,000 job descriptions later, some I worked on personally as a recruiter, some I helped others, maybe even more than that. I have never, ever, ever, ever used a job description listing skills, experience, and competencies. That is not a job description. That is a person description. So I say, everybody, what do you want the person to do? And I don't care whether you're a candidate, a recruiter, or a job seeker. Just ask the manager, hey, what do you want to do? And I'll tell you some stuff that I've done that's related to that. That's the heart and soul of performance-based hiring. It's starting with the job that defines the work that needs to be done, not the people doing it. You do that, you're in the game. You don't do it, you're throwing a dice.
And I think a lot of us do that maybe by happy accident. We're already doing performance-based hiring because you take the job descriptions, it's got the skills, it's got the competencies. A lot of time it's just a cookie cutter copy of somebody else's job description from a similar org with maybe some additional bullet points added and some blurb about your organization. And when you're actually then sourcing, when you're actually then hiring, you're asking for some of that stuff that's just inferred or some of that stuff that's heard from the hiring manager, that's the real soul of what somebody's looking for. And certainly when it gets to that interview stage, it's a part of that. So I think for the kind of journey that we want to go on today and kind of the build up to this was really around, well, how can we go from the creation of a performance-based hiring methodology right the way through? And you mentioned that figure of 2000. From what you've shown me already, well, what I saw before the show, like you could do 2000 right now, right? This is the power of what's possible, leveraging AIs. Yeah, I would love to think about, I suppose, some of the key elements that we should focus on as we go through.
Well, let me
Um,
kind of,
yeah, yeah, go for
I mean, let me kind of just give an overview and then you can kind of set up whatever you want. I retired 3 years ago. Preparing a performance based job description, asking the hiring manager, whether you're a recruiter or an interviewer or a candidate, is, I don't want to say it's hard. It's logical, and managers always, yeah, I'll do that. But when push comes to shove, they say, no, just get me some candidates and I'll know somebody when I see them. And that's pretty much the way it goes. So the discipline of creating a performance-based job description for an accountant, it could be upgrade the reporting system, hire 3 new accountants. For a marketing person, we launch a project in 6 months. It's always outcomes, but getting the manager to define those outcomes, no matter how important and logical they seem, takes work. AI made that easier. You can, we can kind of talk about that, Sam, if you want. But the idea that I can just go into AI in our system in particular and say, hey, I need a performance-based job description for a marketing manager leading a project to do X, Y, and Z, and it will create something. Then I'll review that with the hiring manager. So I came back out of retirement because I could see AI was a great model to really do better hiring. But I see too many HR people just trying to be faster at what they're doing, filter more candidates, layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. It's like putting Band-Aids on top of a sick patient and wondering why it doesn't get better. It's because you need major surgery. And I think AI allows you to re-engineer the whole hiring process, but most people in HR don't want to do that. And it's not that they just don't know how to do it. It's almost like when you don't know what you don't know, you just do what you do know. And sometimes what you do know isn't the best way.
And I think that point on like whether people are set up in the right way to deal with it, like definitely people are trying to do things faster. That kind of band-aid analogy is great, but it's also the same on the other side as well, right? Candidates are also becoming more attuned with the tooling that they are using in order to gain the system. And then it's that kind of red team versus blue team setup, a bit like you'd have in cybersecurity, where one half's getting stronger, the other half is then it's an arms race, which is following the same methodologies. And I think this is about breaking the mold, and this is about building those relationships and having kind of conversations or enabling people to think about things in a different way altogether. I think the other point, just to double click on, when you were talking around hiring managers and what do you want somebody to do within the role, what is their purpose, what is the actual delivery output, well, that should be justified as part of the role being signed off in the first place. And maybe rather than the kind of job description style briefing, the briefing should be happening at that first stage when the role is initially being signed off. We're trying to get to objective A. This person's going to help by achieving X, Y, and Z. That's the justification. That's then the kind of foundation to build from. So um, I think that's awesome. And what I'd love to get into now is some examples of what you're doing, what you've kind of built. Love to share it with the world in terms of, yeah, how you're able to kind of scale this a bit faster than, well, not a bit faster, a lot faster than what would happen before, and enable organizations to kind of re-engineer the way they're thinking about things. So I'll throw the kind of microphone over to you.
Well, you want it? Can you share the screen? You got it.
Yep.
Okay. So let me kind of just step back here, and I want to kind of put this perspective from whether you're a hiring manager, a candidate, or a recruiter, or someone in that process. The idea that if you're assessing a person and you don't know what this person needs to do, you've already added subjectivity in it. Because if you don't know what the job looks like, do I like the person? Do I think they can do this? But you don't really know. But when everybody on the interviewing team knows what they're looking for and has a role to assess it, that's you actually get the right answer. The truth is, I'm a pretty good interviewer. I've interviewed literally 5,000 people, maybe more, but certainly in that order. Now, you do this for 40 years. That's not really a lot when you divide that many by 40. So nonetheless, what I've seen is when everybody debriefs and if everybody knows what they're looking for, the collective wisdom of the interviewing team is remarkable. When everybody has a subjective view of what the job is, then their biases determine the outcome. And the biggest bias, which is usually the boss, overrides everybody else. So to get down to the process, so let me take this point of view from a candidate. While I said that understanding the job is the most important thing, candidates have a responsibility to, if they're going to take a job, just ask the hiring manager or the recruiter, hey, tell me a little bit about the job. What do you want the person to do? What kind of problems a person is going to solve? That gets you in the game. Then if you're a candidate, you can say, well, let me give you some examples of work that I've done that's most related to that. So this is my candidate facing tip. If you ask those two questions, well, first, the first question is, hey, tell me a little about the job. What are the problems? What do you want solved? You're already in the top half of all the candidates, top half. You then answer it right, you're going to get an offer, or at least you'll be in the top quartile. So, as dumb as that sounds, most candidates just sit there and the manager's asking a bunch of silly questions, or the recruiter box checking your skills, the compensation. So let me kind of give you this overview of performance-based hiring, give you an idea of how it can work for you as at the process level. And I don't want to get into too many details, Sam. Feel free to interrupt me and maybe we'll give one example for one job. First off, as I said, create a performance-based job description. My role has always been as a recruiter. My prior 10 years in industry, I was running a company, so I hired a lot of people, but I then became a recruiter and said, hey, I can actually find better people. But then you got to get the hiring manager to own that job description. You then, in my mind, never, ever, ever, ever post a boring job description. I've talked to the number one labor attorney in the United States. He wrote a white paper. He said, I don't understand why people post jobs that list skills, experience, and competencies. Why would anybody? It's marketing. No other industry or function in the world posts boring job descriptions or boring advertising other than HR. So right away, our system will create a compelling job uh, and source candidates using tools like Hack a Job, other related, but those tools are great in the hands of a great recruiter who knows the job and knows marketing. You got great candidates. We then prepare our system interview. We want to make sure the hiring manager and the interviewing team interview the candidate for that role. Our system goes through that whole process, onboards them. But the real win, and I think I'm going to end it, this conversation, Sam, and we can chat about it. What I look at when I look at HR systems, everybody's trying to optimize some step in the process. Better filtering, better knockout questions, better online interviews. We use an agent to do this and this. They miss the end game. The end game is not, and candidates miss the end game. They think it's getting a job offer. No, the end game is at least a year after you started, and you, the candidate, are excited about the job, and the hiring manager is excited about you. The end game is you got to maximize the new hire experience, the person who gets hired, and you got to maximize the hiring manager experience to hire a great person. Why we forget those things makes no sense. But you look at any HR tech, and it's never that. It's always from a
numbers were read. So the exhaustion of looking department to have more work from his idea. Well, why aren't you hitting? Why? Looking at the numbers, saying why isn't on you as the business owner, the founder, the CEO over time? Because why it really where's your tool? And then the reality is that they're just not getting time because, like I said, all the reasons are valid.
If I had to look at it, that's what this thing does. But the key domino in this thing is you got to understand the work.
And he had an idea that an entire other
because when a candidate takes the job, he or she does, that's not the job I signed up for. I didn't know that was the work. You got a problem. We can kind of do a little bit of playing acting here and show you the demo, Sam, but let's kind of keep it at.
Yeah. And I think definitely want to come to the demo. Definitely want to like show some examples because I think what you built is seriously impressive. I think the kind of piece for me around the justification for moving to this model in an organization. So you were speaking then around kind of this lack of performance, people not hitting the mark within the first year of their job, people not being engaged while they're working. I can see it loading up. People not being engaged whilst they're in their workplace environment. What would be your guidance to people that are currently facing this pressure to respond to high volumes of applications in order to maintain their candidate experience, to continue working to their existing KPIs, SLAs within their organization. But clearly, the post effect in many organizations or for many hires, based on the kind of data that you're sharing, is not necessarily generating the result that the role was actually created for, which is the outcomes. So,
So
how do you, like, that's part of the justification as I'm playing it out, but practically, how do you have that discussion as a recruiter, as a manager of recruiters who can go into the business and say, hey, we want to kind of approach this in a different way. We want to take away this job description. We want to move to a performance-based hiring model. Like, what's your kind of guidance? How should people
Well,
start that
I think
journey?
it starts with, so let me just say this. If you, as a recruiter, but I know some recruiters are going to see this, don't know the job, let's be real frank. You're just a paper pusher. Your box checking skills. In my mind, placing a person in a new job is a complex two-part decision. The candidate and his or her advisors, they got family, friends, spouses, grandparents, former coworkers or coworkers, and can always advise that candidate. So you got to and if you want to hire a good person, you have a discriminating buyer. If the person's hungry for a job, their short-term needs was, I got to get on a job, I got to make the payments, I got to pay for my car, the house. That becomes a short-term issue. But you as a recruiter still have to know that. What is this candidate's decision criteria at the moment you're finding the person? On the flip side, you have a hiring manager who has to fill a job, and they're desperate too. So that everybody when you're filling a job, it's a very short, I got to fill it, I got to fill it, I got to fill it. Well, the truth is, if you had a workforce plan, you'd start filling the job 3 to 6 months before it was needed. But that's a different issue. But as a recruiter, if you don't know the job and the circumstances from each of the buyers, the hiring manager and his or her team, and the candidate, his or her team, all you're doing is pushing paper. So what I try to do is I create a performance-based job description. Let me kind of just create one here, and I'll just see. I was hoping I could find one for a marketing manager launching. And let's see what it asked me. Launching a new financial app, FinApp. Let's just see if it knows that worldwide.
And Lou, maybe just worth giving a little bit of background around what this is. So obviously this is the ChatGPT interface, but it's a bit more than that, right? In terms of how this is set up and where this is pulling that information from.
Well, what we've done is, so again, guys, I'm old. I've been around. I've written 5 books. Easily every year, write 50 to 100 articles. So now you take that times 25 or 30 years, you got a lot of work. So I've embedded all of that knowledge into our GPT. In addition, I'm on the internet. That stuff's on the internet. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good, but it's all there. And then we've created what we call workflows within our GPT. How do you go through this? How do you prepare an interview? How do you role play that? So we've got a lot of additional insight and knowledge on sequences and workflows that we built into it. In this case, and I'm gonna make the opening statement here, is the job analysis that is conducted when any new rec is open is the most important part of the entire hiring process. If you blow that, you will not, you're rolling the dice. Because think about it. If a person is known to the hiring manager, let's assume I've worked with Sam for 5 years and I've got a new VP marketing role. Hey, Sam, I've opened up this new company. Would you be interested in this? Well, tell me a little about your need. Sam I already know Sam, so I'm not checking his skills or experience. We're just saying, hey, does Sam really think this job is good for him? So the whole discussion is past, do I know Sam's ability? It's about the work. But when you hire someone you don't know, it's always about, does Sam have even the skill sets? And you almost forget about the work, which is, when you just think about that, is so dumb, but that's what happens. Now, Sam's got to get a job. The hiring manager's got to fill the role. Yeah, Sam sounds pretty good. He went to right school. I don't like his accent, but hey, we're okay. I can live with it. But so when you think about it, when you know the work, and this is, to me, as a hiring manager, stop. Tell me what the job is. Then I talk to Sam about, I got to see if Sam's skills can do this work. Now, you, the candidate, do I want to do this work? And if you don't know that, both of you are being irresponsible, the hiring manager and the candidate, because we make decisions. I got to get back on the payroll. Oh, I liked it. It sounded pretty good. So what I do when I talk to a candidate, and we train recruiters and hiring managers all around the world, I just say, do not make a job offer to a candidate until you ask this question. Candidate, forget the money. Forget it. It's going to be good enough. Forget the money for a moment. Why do you want this job? And if you can't describe the job, the details, who you're going to work with, why you want it, why it's a career motivating job, do not take it because it's going to be a disappointment. Say the hiring manager, tell me about why you want, what the work is about this job and why you think this candidate's a good person for this job. And if the manager can't answer those questions, the interview has been superficial. And if the candidate can't agree with that job, it's problematic. And yet that simple check is never asked.
And it just quickly to double click, because I think you've just touched on probably the most important, but yet the simplest rundown of what recruitment truly is. And that is inferring the understanding of what the role is directly from the hiring manager and from the organization, and convincing somebody or having a conversation and getting their buy-in in order to join that organization. That is just the root of what we do. And when I think about that in the context of what we've been building and how we work, at Hacker Job, a lot of the time, job descriptions, which lots of matching engines are built off or are being built off, are just not a reflection of what the work is. There's always something missing. There's always something from either that recruiter intuition or from the hiring manager context that's missing. So how can you then build that into the process so that the matching is just far more reliable and you're having a better experience all around? So yeah, I love that. And I think it's just the core tenets of recruiting, which a phrase from another big industry leader in Bill Borman used last year on this show. It's like, there's something that's just never going to change, which is understanding the hiring manager perception, understanding the business need, and then allowing or convincing or getting that buy-in from the candidate side of the market. A lot of the time there's too much noise in between those two things, or a lot of over processing in order to make up for the shortcomings of not having that first conversation conducted in the right way and not having that end conversation conducted in the right way. So I love that framing of capturing the core requirements up front and then just asking the killer question of like, why do you actually want this role?
Yeah, so let me take Bill's point one or two steps further. When you look at after a person starts on the job, how they got the job one way or the other is not unimportant. But when you look at why people underperform, it's rarely because of their technical skills. It's generally, and I'm going to say this is pretty statistical, true, and I've experienced when my firm placed over 1,000, 1,500 people, so we tracked it for my search firm, so we tracked the results. Most people underperform, not because they're not any good, because they didn't like the job wasn't what they thought it was. In my firm, that never became the case because we enforced that. After a few years, we realized that was critical, so we enforced that. But the next criteria, that job is not what I wanted to do. It's I don't like the hiring manager. So those two things are critical. You have to know the job and you have to deal with the hiring manager. So part of my work as a recruiter, so I'll take Bill's point, is not only do I know the job, not only do I know the company, not only do I know the industry and the competitive posture and the growth opportunities, I also know the hiring manager's leadership style. Is a person a over micromanager, a delegator, a coach, a good person, has a track record of it, or not such a good manager and kind of, but it's open enough to let a person do their own thing? Well, that determines who you should hire. So the work is one level, but how is that person going to work on that team and with that manager is equally as critical. But let's start with this. Now, all I put in here was create a performance-based job description for a marketing manager and launching a new FinApp worldwide. It then came back, says it's B2B or B2C. Will the marketing manager be managing a global team? Any specific growth targets? I want to just say increase market share to 3%. Something like that. Who knows? From 0. See what happens.
How are they hiring at 0%?
Well, it's a new product. So here's a draft of the performance profile. Now, here's an overview of the role. Here's the employee value proposition, why someone would want it. Then it goes through and identifies 5 or 6 key performance objectives. Here's lead to North America, build and scale market infrastructure, drive revenue 3% contribution. I mean, it walked through step by step what needs to be done. Now, I'm going to make the statement, this is probably, so normally as a recruiter, I would probably thin this down a little bit, let's assume Sam was a manager. I say, Sam, does this look like the job? And Sam would say, no, this is this and this. The key is we as recruiters, We're middlemen. We don't do it. We don't accept the job for a candidate, and we don't determine who's hired. The hiring manager does that. But if you as a recruiter don't know how to make sure the hiring manager knows this, you're not doing your job. Just as important, if you're doing and making sure the candidate's not interviewed properly and knows the job, you're not doing your job. To me, that's going to be the future of recruiting. It's getting the candidates and the hiring manager on point to say, hey, this is what we're hiring you for. And to me, that's the role. AI can create this. Did it? I mean, it did it. It's pretty, is it
Yeah.
perfect? I don't know, but it's pretty good. I would tell you most hiring managers wouldn't even know that. Here, conduct a 30-day audit of marketing readiness, implement an action plan, define the buyer's persona. And this is unbelievable. I mean, I get chills when I look at that. Normally, this would take me 3 to 4 hours to pull this together. What did it take? I didn't even give any information. It done it in a few seconds. So when you think about the value of this can be done by AI. Now, too many people are automating. Hey, let's hire the people faster who are applying. No, I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do, Sam, is I'm going to create a compelling. I'm not going to post this. I'm not going to post it. I'm going to create a marketing version of this and say, hey, candidate, if you're interested in this, send us a write-up of something you've done that's most comparable. It's going to be totally different. I don't want you to send your resume. Tell me about something you've done that's related. Now, I proposed this to LinkedIn. I said, why don't you do this? Before LinkedIn did their job board 10 years ago, I said, why don't you do this? Don't make it easy to apply. Make it hard to apply, but give everyone an opportunity to talk to somebody. Oh, no. We don't want to do that. We want to, we make money selling job postings, not. So I got kicked out of LinkedIn's meeting. I have not been at a LinkedIn event since then. I thought it was a great idea. Still do. That's why people hire. And I think eventually they'll come around to it. Hey, we're actually doing that now with our clients. They actually will create a selling posting and they apply it, and you get fewer candidates, but the candidates are better. And they say, well, I like that job. That sounds like me. And even when I find a tool like Hack a Job, Sam, I'm going to identify good candidates on Hack a Job who could do this work. Say, hey, here's the job. If you're interested, let's talk. So it's a different approach. It's much more high tech, and use high tech to get in the game, but use high touch to win the game. That's a good line.
Yeah, killer.
I like that.
There's the soundbite. There's the follow-on video. This is going to be the clip to promote this when it goes onto YouTube. I think, but it's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. It's like that high tech, high touch, enabling essentially people to operate at pace. It's all of the stuff that we've been talking about, but I think it's the framing here that's different. I think it's the framing here that's important. This isn't about just removing the noise from within your database. I suppose the challenge to double click on it that you're kind of throwing out to people is, well, approach it in a totally different way. And I love that kind of killer question, a variation on the killer question, because killer questions are often, do you have the right to live and work within X? Do you have any conflict of interest if you're working for a financial services organization? It's like very black and white questions that are either yes, no answers that are knocking people out of the process, versus like, have you actually done this work before? Or like, how would you approach this challenge? Or how would you work through it? Now, it's a little bit more labor intensive on the candidate piece. I think there's definitely going to be some, like, with that approach, there's a little bit of healthy friction versus what has become an increasingly frictionless process. Because for the last 10 years or so, well, probably the 10 years that preceded the last 2 years, everything's been about how can we make it as frictionless as possible? How can we increase the ease of the application? How can we stop people having to land on the ATS field where they're having to re-input the information that they've already included on their resume? Great, we're going to add this CRM flow. We're going to add a different way of engaging with people versus them going through our HRIS, right? We're going to make one-click apply. All of these things was all about making it frictionless. But now this is
this frictionless. I think and a lot of people are doing it. I think that's where HR and HR designers get it wrong. Friction is not in the application process. Friction is in the post-hire process. How much time does a hiring manager have to spend with someone who underperforms? How much time do they spend on trying to get a below average person become average, fire a person who they should never have hired? So that's what, 2 to 3 hours a week at minimum. So you're talking hundreds of hours. That's where the friction is. You hire a great person, you don't even have to talk to them. They get the job done. So we think about pre-hire friction, and it should be balanced with post-hire friction. but no, let's get people to apply, make that frictionless. No, let's get fewer people to apply. Hey, yes, but I don't. So you look at from a candidate standpoint, 1,000 candidates pushing the button, 30 seconds each. You take 10 candidates creating an accomplishment they've done, it in total time for the candidate, it's about the same time. But the candidates actually don't just waste their time applying, they're actually doing something. Hey, I want this job. So you've already pre-closed them before they even apply. I want that job, but it's not about the money. Yeah, the money's got to be competitive. It's about, oh yeah, I want to do that work. We're just changing the nature of the game. And it's saying, I think if you re-engineer the hiring process and get rid of that stupid friction comment, I don't think anybody in my mind has actually been in a manufacturing to understand what the friction is. You got to understand the end game before you understand what you do. And I hear that all the time, Fran. Take the friction out. Take the friction out. No, put the friction back in, and you'll hire better people.
And we're
Like,
definitely at that stage right now. We're definitely at the point, and it has been over the last 18 months, where organizations are realizing that, now is the time to add the friction back in. And how can we make this a more precision focused experience, but also leverage technology to enable humans to have more interaction, because ultimately relationships win though, right? When it comes to like conversions and ongoing performance, it's like the people that perform in organizations are the people where it started from a relationship rather than a transaction, which is true not just in recruitment, it's true in life, right? It's all around actual genuine connection as
no
opposed to that
question,
kind of
sure.
transactional relationship. And you've got something coming up. So I think, we flashed up really on screen today because that's all that it took to build that, performance-based job description, which is like step one of, I think, 14 points in the setup that you've got. And all of that architecture is built with decades of experience, all of that writing, all of that content. And then ultimately, and this is the crucial part, then that guidance of how, the large language model should then think about deploying. There's also the piece around that, right? It's not just a case of building the system and the architecture in the background that then says, hey, this is how we're going to deploy this. And this is what the answer should look like, and this is how to make it robust, etc. It's then how to play that relationship internally, how to have those conversations in a performance-based hiring setup with candidates. And you've got something coming up. I'd love to use this as an opportunity to plug for you rather than you plug for yourself in terms of that performance-based hiring sprint that you've got coming up. And I'd love
Keeps back and then take one forward.
today a few times today, Lou. This has been a bit of a dance. But every time we're about to step forward, we take one little jump back and then forward. So yeah, go on, let's jump back.
We have a webcast, and it turns out the CEO of Hack a Job will be on it on Tuesday, June 24th. It's called Moneyball for HR. Moneyball for HR is at the core of all of what I talk about here, is this idea that the best candidates who can do this work do not have traditional backgrounds. They probably can do this marketing job we just talked about, not with 10 years experience in an MBA or this. They obviously have to have enough experience to do the work, but I don't know how much that is. So the idea is in Moneyball, you've got to look at non-traditional candidates. And the best candidates, number one, have a different mix of skills and experience. And they probably got 10 years experience in 3 or 4 years. You cannot find those kind of people using traditional filters. That's why the idea of taking friction out, to me, doesn't make sense. No, change the definition of what you want and you'll get better results, and it'll slide through without friction. You've added friction, you got to take friction out because the process has friction designed in. No, take the friction out at the beginning, not at the end. I mean, that to me is just like an engineering principle 101. But I bet there's not a single, and my background as an engineer, just to give everyone a sense, I worked on the guidance system, a nuclear missile, when I was 22 years old in 1968. You don't take friction out of a system, you redesign the system to not have friction. Now, so I think the idea that I'd like to present is get people to go to this Moneyball for HR program next week. I don't know how you advertise that and all that. We do have a sprint. The idea of learning this idea of performance-based hiring, we can tell people how to do it all day long. Then we do it. We got to have them do it. We want people to actually do it, talk to a manager, find a marketing person, find a software developer, find an accountant, whatever it is. We want you to do it. And that's what we call the performance-based hiring sprint. starting in July, 4, 5, 6 weeks where we actually work every week on a step in this process, hold your hand and go through it. We're trying to change the whole pricing model, Sam. So I'm not sure that is, I'm actually want to go to companies and say, hey, how would you like to hire a person for $1,000? And you're going to pay the tuition for a recruiter to go through it. Trying to, I tell you, that's actually a better way to do it. And if they get a candidate, great. They paid to, and a recruiter learns and a company gets a good person. So I'm trying to rechange the pricing model for that. I want to get companies invested to say, hey, this can be done, but we got to get a lot of buy-in. So that's the idea. I don't know where you want to run with that or how to do it.
Yeah.
That's
Love
the
it.
idea.
Love it. Love it. And I think, this is it. This is about leveraging tools. It's about leveraging technology, but it's having that guidance along the journey, because it's all well and good being able to leverage, the system that you built in the background, being able to leverage that knowledge combined with the efficiency and power of a large language model, but actually putting that into practice, working through the program, working through the process, and changing the way in which you're looking to hire, crucial. We'll include the Moneyball for HR session. We'll definitely do some promotion for that. If you're watching the session now, I think you've still got about 20 of you with us. If you hit that button to say that I'm interested, we'll then be able to share it directly to you via email. And then obviously we'll promote the session for the sprint coming up in July as well. It's been absolute pleasure having you on the show. I knew that we'd run over. We didn't cover half of the bits which I wanted to cover. We covered loads of the bits which I did want to cover, and I hope we covered what you wanted to cover as well. There's so much more to go and dive into. In the meantime, Lou, where can people find out resources? Where can people go and check out more from yourself?
Well, I would just, as a short thing, you certainly can follow me on LinkedIn, but just go to performancebasedhiring.com and you'll see a lot of interesting stuff there. So that's the best way to get started. We have a newsletter, and you can kind of tell that I'm trying to figure out the world of hiring, and it's changed. AI represents a unique opportunity, but I see too many HR people are taking it in the wrong direction. I think it could be totally redesigned in the entire hiring process. That changes it from getting better to re-engineering how work is done in the world. And that to me is really the fascinating opportunity we have here. I hope we don't blow it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And we have to take that opportunity. Now, this is the awkward bit, Lou, at the end of the show, because I can see on LinkedIn Live we're about 5 or 10 seconds behind, and I don't want to end the stream abruptly. So this is basically me doing filler talk for the last 5 seconds. I can see it's caught up now. Thank you for joining. Lou, you've been incredible. Definitely go and check out the resources, folks that have watched it. And great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye.